Hello everyone, and I'm Autobot Sonic the Telltale Gamer, bringing latest in Telltale games, Transformers, and more. For today's EarthSpark review, we're going to be looking at Transformers EarthSpark Season 1, Episode 20, Disarmed. This episode is cool in the fact that it gives a lot of very much needed world building to the world of EarthSpark, explaining a lot of backstory of some characters, and also just fleshing out the world a bit more. It also kickstarts a brand new, really interesting arc that will be spanning over the next two episodes, episodes 21 and 22, but that really is an interesting one in my opinion. That has a really nice payoff in episode 22. However, I will say as a start for this arc, it is a little bit weak. So what exactly is this episode about? Let's go ahead and talk about it in this review and see everything it did right and what it did wrong. Episode 20, Disarmed, starts out with the return of Swindle of all characters. I'm very, very excited to see again. It has been nearly 16 episodes since we last saw Swindle, with the last time being in episode 4, House Rules, when he escaped Thrash and Mo and Dot after stealing the Energon scanner with their help. So we see him presumably still looking for a hard top as he's underground in these tunnels that we'll see a lot more of in the next episode of episode 21, and this is just a little teaser of that. So Swindle is using the Energon scanner that he stole back in episode 4 to go through these tunnels, presumably looking for hardtop. As we do this, we see him heading towards what presumes to be an exit of the tunnels, when we cut above ground to Dot, Optimus, and Robby hanging out at Dot's little workplace in the ranger station, which is we last saw her working at all the way back in episode 5 when she took Robby, Twitch, Thrash, and Mo there as a little like field trip of sorts. Anyways, there's a large little boulder in a cave on the side of the ranger station that it gets blasted off when Dot picks up an Energon signature coming from underground. So she has Robby go hide, which she agrees to, just in time for Swindle to pop out, realizing that he's run into Dot and Optimus. So Optimus ends up trying to get Swindle to surrender, but Swindle doesn't. He ends up transforming and trying to run away, so Optimus and Dot chase after him. So as they're both chasing Swindle, we get this nice little like car chase where Swindle is running away from Optimus, and he actually activates like a turret built into his back truck bed, shooting it at Optimus and Dot. And while they're both doing a good job of dodging everything, Dot ends up finding out that Robby had actually hidden inside the back of her truck, just hanging out there, saying that he wanted to go and help Dot battling Swindle and Optimus because he thinks that he can do good now with all he's experienced over the past 20 episodes. So Dot tries to drive a bit more defensively now, knowing that Robby's in there, and Swindle tries to take advantage of this by, instead of focusing on Optimus like he has been, ends up shooting at Robby and Dot. So Swindle, I think, shoots a missile at Robby and Dot, and it looks like it's gonna hit Robby, and there's this big explosion that causes Dot's truck to be run off the road. When I first saw this, it reminded me a lot actually of Season 1 of Transformers Prime when Bumblebee was taking Raph out for a drive, and then Megatron just swoops in and shoots Bumblebee, nearly killing Raph in the process. It reminded me a lot of that scene. So once Dot's cars run off the road, Optimus freaks out and goes over to Swindle, and they get into a little struggle, and it seems as though Swindle's actually going to get away for a second, but not before Optimus ends up slapping one of those stasis inhibitors that we saw him and Bumblebee use back in episode 8 on Soundwave's cassettes on his shoulder, forcing Swindle back into his alt mode and restraining him. So with Swindle dealt with, Optimus runs over to Dot and Robby to see if they're okay, and surprisingly they both are, because somehow Robby ended up unlocking his unique Cybersleeve ability, which is that of his shield, and as he calls it later on this episode, he refers to it going forward as a cyber shield, so that's what I'm going to be calling it from now on. So Robby's in total awe of the power that his Cybersleeve has by getting this cyber shield, and Dot's just relieved to have him be okay, and Robby explains that with this cyber shield he can do so much more, that he feels like he should be put into fights more often because he can use this shield to protect Dot, Alex, and the rest of the Terrans as well. So Optimus comes over at this point, notices Robby's cyber shield, and is in awe of the power it has, comparing it to the power of various other primes, and that he believes that Robby may end up being as strong as a prime, which is really interesting, but also kind of makes sense considering that literally the Cybersleeves are a gift from Quintus Prime, so you could say he and Mo both carry the essence of Quintus Prime, so to speak. So Optimus obviously is clearly interested in learning more and testing more about the capabilities of both Robby and Mo's Cybersleeve. So while Dot seems to initially reject it, not wanting to put Robby in more danger, with convincing from both Optimus and Robby, she eventually does agree to let Optimus run tests on Robby and Mo to try and better understand their Cybersleeves while also upgrading them in the process. that ends the cold open of this episode, where afterwards we cut to inside back of the main ghost base that we've been seeing several times throughout the series so far. Specifically, the Teletran 1 room that we saw Optimus dump Robby, Mo, Twitch, and Thrash in all the way back in episode 5. And as I predicted back in episode 5, it turns out that that computer looked very much so like Teletran 1 is in fact Teletran 1. So Optimus, Robby, and Dot are there alongside Mo and the rest of the Terrans. And also there is none other than Wheeljack, who we haven't seen also in a very long time since the first batch back in episode 6. So it's great to see Wheeljack again, though some of you might notice that there's something different about him compared to how he was in episode 6, and that is you can actually see this time he's wearing an Autobot ghost badge on his chest instead of just a plain Autobot badge he wore in episode 6. I think this might have been an animation error all the way back in the first batch, because we've seen this twice now. First in episode 8, Starscream had red eyes, but in this batch and the last batch we saw Starscream, he had blue eyes. So I imagine the first batch of EarthSpark episodes was really early on in development, and maybe they just didn't have like the plan of, Starscream was gonna have blue eyes instead of red eyes, or maybe it was just an error that they meant to put an Autobot ghost badge on Wheeljack back in episode 6, but they just forgot about it, so they just gave him the regular Autobot badge. It's really interesting to see how their designs have changed over the course of this show. But I think it makes more sense now because, like, oh, if Wheeljack created the drones that Twitch scanned back in episode 2, and Optimus and Alita explained clearly while in front of Ghost agents that Wheeljack made them, wouldn't it make sense that Wheeljack was working for Ghost as well? And this pretty much confirms it, that yes, Wheeljack is working for Ghost. So pretty much every Autobot now is working for Ghost, with the exception of Bumblebee, who Ghost believes is dead at this point. Anyway, mini rant aside, Wheeljack takes a quick little scan of Robby and Mo's Cybersleeves and runs them through Teletran 1 to see what's going on. So he and Optimus both conclude that apparently the Cybersleeves Robby and Mo possess are capable of is that their power rivals that of other Cybertronian artifacts like the Matrix of Leadership. And for some reason, Robby doesn't seem to know what the Matrix of Leadership is, which I figure that, you have whole textbooks dedicated to Cybertronian history you're being taught in your schools. You'd think that they'd have an article or like a little chapter in their history books based off one of the most important Cybertronian relics of all time. But maybe similarly to how Alita didn't want Jawbreaker to tell people about T-Cogs, maybe I guess that this is just sort of a classified information that only other Cybertronians should be privy to know? Maybe? I don't know. But yeah, Optimus explains that the power of the Cybersleeves that Robby and Mo possess could be equal to that of the Matrix of Leadership or other Cybertronian artifacts. So when Robby and Mo ask him what the Matrix of Leadership is, we get this really, like, in just a way funny scene. Optimus just pulls open his chest to reveal the Matrix of Leadership. And I'm sorry, it might just be how my mind works, but the way Optimus just so eagerly opens his chest to show up the Matrix of Leadership in front of them. I'm like, Optimus, put that away! There are children out here! I know, my mind shouldn't be thinking like that, but I just couldn't think of it anyway else. It was just hilarious in my head. But anyway, as Optimus opens his chest to reveal the Matrix of Leadership, he explains to them all that it's a Cybertronian artifact that was given to him by one of the original 13 Primes as a way to ensure the safety of Cybertron. It's also at this point that we learned Optimus's backstory in EarthSpark, where much just like every other incarnation of Optimus in EarthSpark was also, again, previously known as Orion Pax. What's interesting, though, about EarthSpark Orion Pax is what he was before becoming Optimus. So, in the Alliance continuity and Cyberverse continuities, Orion Pax used to be very integrated with just like the bureaucratic system of Cybertron. In the Prime continuity, Orion Pax was an archivist that worked directly under Alpha Trion. In Cyberverse, he was a file clerk / archivist who also worked under Alpha Trion. However, in the IDW comics, he was instead a cop who often collaborated with Alpha Trion. And then in G1, he was actually just a simple dock worker. And funnily enough, EarthSpark Orion Pax, for the first time since G1, has the same backstory as G1 Orion Pax, in that EarthSpark Orion Pax seems to have been a dock worker as well, or as Optimus puts it, just a regular Cybertronian citizen. But the picture we see here is just of Orion Pax, like, doing work, it looks as being some sort of gravel pit / mine shaft, so it's not exactly clear if Orion Pax in EarthSpark was a dock worker or if he was a miner like Megatron or something else. But it's really interesting to see, after nearly 10 to 15 years of Orion Pax being either a cop or an archivist like other continuities have. The fact that we're back to him being more of a manual laborer like G1 Optimus was, it's really cool to see that EarthSpark is taking so many cues from G1, very similar to how Animated did almost 15 years ago. So I really like that. Anyway, as Optimus narrates to Robby Mo basically how he got the Matrix, we see through clips a figure that very much so resembles Alpha Trion gave Orion the Matrix leadership, and that turned him into Optimus because Civil War was on the brink of happening at Cybertron, and Alpha Trion believed that Orion Pax would be the perfect mech to take the Matrix leadership and become the next Prime as Optimus. And while we're at it, and Optimus is telling everyone about the 13 Primes, we actually get silhouettes of a lot of them with various Cybertronian artifacts. I'm not well versed in every single Cybertronian artifact, but ones I could make out here were, of course, the Ember Stone, which you see being held by Quintus Prime here, right next to Alpha Trion with Matrix leadership. But you can also see two other Primes holding what appear to be the Enigma of Combination and the Star Saber. It's really cool how EarthSpark is giving very small little nods to other continuities of Transformers in this little clip, and hopefully maybe this is a little teaser for season 2. Maybe we'll get to see the Star Saber and Enigma combination. I would love to see maybe in season 2 if the Terrans actually end up being able to form a combiner. That would be really cool to see. Anyway, after Optimus finishes explaining the Matrix of leadership to Robby and Mo and believes that the Cybersleeves may be capable of unlocking the power of Quintus Prime himself, Robby is more than eager to go ahead and try to test himself out to try and unlock new abilities and force them, as the summary of this episode implied. So while Dot is still very hesitant about letting this happen, Optimus assures her that it'll be totally safe and that they can use the training room that we saw, again, all the way back in episode 5 to basically go against like weaker enemies, like simulation, go through other simulations in hopes of unlocking Cybersleeve abilities. So excitedly, Robby, Mo, and the rest of the Terrans are led by Optimus into the Ghost training room to go ahead and try and test their combat capabilities. And in my opinion, this is one of my biggest problems with this episode, where just similarly to how I felt about the last episode with Sticky Situations coming in conflict, it feels like Optimus just was so willingly taking the Maltos and Terrans straight into Ghost headquarters, you know, the people that they are supposed to keep hitting from. It just feels really irresponsible on Optimus's part, and to me, feels a little bit out of character for him. I understand doing it back in episode 5 because Optimus planned to keep them all in his trailer. He didn't expect them to go rummaging around through the whole Ghost headquarters. But the fact that he's just so willing to be like, oh yeah, we'll just carry like Terrans and Malto children that Ghost is actively looking for. We'll let them like wander around freely. What's the worst that could happen? Just, it's a little frustrating in my opinion, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. As the Maltos are being led to the Ghost training room, we cut to Mandroid of all characters, who we haven't seen since episode 18, and he is stowed away inside this little like makeshift lab that he has inside of Ghost, presumably working on upgrades to the mind control chips we saw him agree to make for Croft and the rest of Ghost back in the end of the second batch. So Croft comes in actually checking in on Mandroid just as he's like in another coughing fit due to being low on Energon and just be getting sicker and sicker, as we can see. He's even sicker than he was at the end of episode 18, which is really interesting considering he seemed to be better after Croft gave him the Energon, but I guess that's run out in the past few days since that episode came through. So Croft's asking Mandroid for an update on what's going on with the mind control chips, but he says he needs more time considering his resources are a bit low. So Croft then allows Mandroid to go ahead and get access to the entirety of the Ghost database for whatever he needs in the hopes that it will expedite his production of the Ghost mind control chips. As Croft leaves Mandroid to do his work, he ends up scouring through it and actually hacking into it to allow more access than he was given. So he ends up like taking a cable out of his right hand, I believe, which is Brawl's hand. He ends up plugging that into the Ghost computer to basically sort of like upload a virus of sorts to the system and allows him to access other files. So this allows him access to the security systems of the Ghost base, where he actually sees Optimus talking to Robby, Mo, and the rest of the Terrans about the Ember Stone and Quintus Prime and all of that. So not only does now Mandroid know the Maltos are here, he also knows about the Ember Stone, which is a big problem, but also kickstarts this mini arc that'll be going on for the next few episodes. And it's really interesting to think that it's funny to think this whole time Mandroid actually never knew the Ember Stone existed, because if we think about it, there are many times where he almost did learn about the Ember Stone prior to this, but just never did. The first time we saw it was back in episode 1 when Mandroid sent one of his arachnamechs to investigate Twitch, Thrash, Robby, and Mo when they were first created in the cave. He almost found out about the Ember Stone, but the arachnamech was destroyed before it could relay information back to him. Secondly, in episodes 9 and 10, when Mandroid sent the horde of arachnamechs alongside Skywarp and Nova Storm to try and kill Robby, Mo, and Alex, everyone, before they could create Nightshade, Hashtag, and Jawbreaker, the Ember Stone was presumably lost in the cave there when it caved in. So it's funny to think that there were so many times now that Mandroid came close to finding out about the Ember Stone, but he's not finding out about it until just now, 20 episodes later. I just think that's a bit funny in my opinion. We then cut back to the Maltos and Terrans battling a bunch of digital arachnamechs inside of the Autobot training room, and it's so cool to see just how effortlessly they take them down now, where we could it's such a cool way to see like how much these characters have evolved over the past 20 episodes, where back in episode 1, Twitch and Thrash could barely handle just a few arachnamechs on their own, and even a bit back later in episode 12, Jawbreaker and Hashtag had to chase the one all over the pier that was going to get away with Jawbreaker's video camera. It's so cool now to see that now that everyone's got their ult modes, they have so much experience under their belts, to see them actually take down these arachnamechs so effortlessly is such a satisfying moment. That see how these characters have grown over the past 20 episodes, and now they're at this point where they're so adept at fighting them. It's really, really cool to see. So they dispatch them with ease, and Robby and everyone wants to try out harder enemies. So they ask Hashtag if she can sort of hack into the Ghost database and basically force up the difficulty of the training room, which she tries to do. But then at the same time, Mandroid hacks into the security cameras, realizes that the Terrans are inside of the training room, and decides to make it extremely challenging, almost deathly so, in an attempt to kill them there. So he ends up hacking into Hashtag once again, which you can clearly see she still has PTSD for, because as Hashtag is trying to raise the difficulty and she senses Mandroid, or I don't think she knows if it is Mandroid, but she senses something's wrong, and you can literally see like the whole like cyberspace inside her head as she's hacking turns black. Mandroid's eyes are behind her, and she even says like, "Oh, not again," when he hacks into her. It's really apparent that she has such a visceral reaction to being hacked again, like she was brain controlled by him back in episodes 17 and 18. So I think that's a really cool callback to that. But anyway, Mandroid successfully hacks into Ghost and forces up the difficulty of the training room a lot. So it does this really cool thing where the whole room creates this holographic replica of the space bridge location from episode 16 Warzone, distinctly right back to the moment where the battle for Space Bridge happened. So Robby, Mo, and everyone else are transported there. Well, they have to fight not a bunch of arachnamechs, but instead a holographic version of Megatron, back when he was still ruling as the leader of Decepticons. So this isn't just kind, good Uncle Megatron who's just old and tired and is really nice to all the Terrans. This is evil tyrant warlord Megatron out for blood. So this Megatron hologram immediately starts attacking everyone, and everyone's freaking out, wondering how they're going to be able to stop Megatron because, well, duh, he's Megatron. And I love, too, how in this we actually get to see Megatron use, or I guess the hologram of Megatron, controlled by Mandroid, uses an Energon flail that he spins around very similarly to his G1 self. And I think Cyberverse Megatron uses it as well, but we haven't really seen any other version of Megatron use an Energon flail since G1, really. So it's a great change of pace to see EarthSpark Megatron, or at least this holographic version of him, use it as well. I really, really enjoyed it. But as everyone is running away from Megatron, Hashtag realizes that there's a terminal inside the Ghost room that hasn't been transformed by the rest of the room that can control the whole training program. So Hashtag believes if she can get to that terminal and override the controls of the training, she can weaken the Megatron drone enough for everyone else to destroy it. So she ends up making a run for the hologram alongside everyone else in an effort to get to it. And it is really entertaining to see everyone try to dodge Megatron and hold him off as Hashtag gets to the terminal. But in my opinion, the fight just goes on for a little bit too long. It does kind of feel a bit boring, if that's possible enough. And that's just in my mind, just a little bit. But to make a long story short, essentially, it ends up getting to a point where pretty much everyone but Hashtag and Robby are knocked out by the Megatron hologram. And as the Megatron hologram ends up approaching Robby tries to fight off the Megatron hologram by activating his cyber shield and basically just tanking all of Megatron's hits. He ends up like slamming his flail down repeatedly on Robby's shield to the point that it's cracking more and more as he tries to keep Hashtag safe while she's trying to override all the files that Mandroid's corrupted on the terminal. As Robby's doing this and the shield cracks more and more, he begs Quintus Prime to help him, which at this point causes him to actually end up in this sort of like symbiotic titan moment. I don't know whether way I can describe it. He ends up creating a giant holographic version of himself that he ends up piloting with himself in the center. So this Robby hologram ends up being as large as the Megatron hologram, and so Robby sort of has like a Pacific Rim mech fight with the Megatron hologram, where he's going around punching Megatron, actually doing damage to him as hashtag gets more of the files uncorrupted. However, this all changes when Robby throws one punch at Megatron, which the Megatron drone catches, and in an instant that really shocked me, Megatron uses his free hand with the Energon flail and slams it down on the holographic Robby's arm, and we don't see anything happen. We just hear like what sounds to be bone cracking, and then Robby's whole Cybersleeve, which has like been totally revealed by like the sleeve of his shirt ripping off, that the Cybersleeve actually cracks, or at least the holographic representation of his Cybersleeve cracks. And it seems as though Robby's arm has been like sprained or dislocated, because we actually see him like hold it in pain, like he's unable to move it for a little bit. And I was really shocked by this, that even though we don't actually see Megatron sort of break Robby's arm in this episode, it's sort of implied that he either broke it or dislocated it, which is really shocking for a kid's cartoon. Just as Megatron is about to go in for the final blow on Robby after dislocating his arm, though, that's when hashtag ends up finishing uncorrupting all the files in the terminal, and therefore making the Megatron hologram vulnerable. So Robby uses the last of his strength to give one really powerful punch that destroys the Megatron hologram, ends up actually like shocking Mandroid for a little bit, like knocking him out as well, as also causes a whole power surge throughout the entire base, which Optimus notices while he's in a meeting with Agent Croft and Schloeder. So, and what bothers me here is that when Optimus notices power surge, he mutters under his breath that Robby must be in danger, right in front of Agent Croft. Like, Optimus, do you not know how to be subtle, my guy? Oh, it's so frustrating sometimes, but I digress. Anyway, Optimus leaves the meeting to go immediately head to the training room along with Dot and Wheeljack and everyone else. They all head over to Robby, where they see him presumably having died, just laying on the floor, just totally unresponsive. And I'm not sure if it's Wheeljack or Mo was able to do this through a like sort of their Cybersleeve connection, but we see like a whole X-ray is done of Robby's body, like first his circulatory system, then his nervous system, and then skeleton. Everything seems to be fine, but he's just not responsive for some reason. Everyone's wondering what's happening, thinking that Robby's dead, this means, but then thankfully he actually wakes up and he seems to be totally fine. However, Wheeljack does a quick scan on him to make sure that he's actually fine, and he makes a shocking discovery that Robby's Cybersleeve is broken. Actually broken, that it doesn't work anymore, and as a result of Robby's Cybersleeve being broken, none of the Terrans or Mo are able to share their psychic connection anymore. They can no longer sense each other's feelings and emotions, and therefore get like power-ups and stuff like that as a result of it, which completely shocks Robby and the rest of the Terrans. They believe that, like, even though they're still a family, I think Twitch mentions that like she's never felt more alone than she has in this moment, where even though everyone is still around with her, since she can't sense everyone's emotions, it feels like she's all alone, which I understand too, to be fair. That I can't imagine, since like she was born essentially, she's been emotionally connected to Robby and Mo and the rest of her siblings. So to have that connection suddenly snapped, it's probably really jarring for her. And we'll see this connection, or the severing of this connection, I should see, explored later on throughout these episodes. But it's going to be really cool to see. And I think that ends it on a somber, but also interesting note that now that the Terran's Cybersleeve connection is broken, what's going to happen to them? Are they going to like grow more distant? Are they going to try to get more closer together in an effort to try and make up for that lack of connection? We'll have to wait and see. But of course, we gotta end this EarthSpark episode with one last Mandroid scene with Croft, where Croft runs into Mandroid's lab checking on what happened to him after the huge power surge caused by Robby defeating the Megatron hologram. But Mandroid assures Croft that everything is fine, that he actually has a solution to help expedite the production of his mind control chips, and that is by showing her that he now knows about the Ember Stone. And this is gonna be a plot point going into the last few episodes of EarthSpark, and now that Croft and Mandroid both know about the Ember Stone, what are they going to be able to do with it? How do they plan to get it and all that? We'll have to wait and see over the next few episodes to find out how. And so that was my review of Transformers EarthSpark Season 1, Episode 20, Disarmed. If I had to rate this episode, I'd probably give it a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10. This was a great episode to further establish the world of EarthSpark by giving us Optimus's backstory as Orion Pax, who in this continuity seemed to be a manual laborer just like G1 Orion Pax. We got more info into Quintus Prime and the various like Primeology, I guess, of EarthSpark. We got to see more of Mandroid and Agent Croft working together. And the fight, while it was a bit like, it dragged on, I think, a bit too much with all the Terrans battling the Megatron hologram controlled by Mandroid. Seeing Robby pilot essentially a giant hologram of himself to fight Megatron was really, really cool to see. My only problems with it, and also, the intro fight with Swindle was really cool to see, even though, since we haven't seen since episode 4. Anyway, though, I do think this episode had problems with just Optimus feeling a bit out of character and just being too nonchalant with the Maltos and Terran safety. Also, not to mention, again, as I mentioned, the fight against the Megatron hologram felt a bit underwhelming, or not underwhelming, just a bit too dragged out in my opinion. But that's going to be it for this review. I'll be back next week with episode 21, What Dwells Within, and you do not want to miss this review. If you like this review, be sure to like, comment, and of course subscribe, and I will see you guys later.